Hey, how's it going everyone? In this lesson, we'll see the differences between function declarations and function expressions in JavaScript. First, we'll define what these terms are, and then we'll see some code inside the AST Explorer, which is a very useful tool in order to understand why these pieces of code are defined as they are. So, let's get started. Before we start, let's forget about functions for a minute and let's define what is a declaration, an expression, and also a statement, which leads to confusion quite often. First, let's see what is a declaration. In the most generic way, you can think of it as the establishment or the announcement of the existence of something, like a variable, a class, or a function. So, it's like the definition or specification of something for the first time, let's say. But there's no need to specify what's inside. And in JavaScript, to declare a function, we need a keyword, an identifier, so a name, which will be used as a reference to call that function. And then we also need the parentheses to indicate that it is an invocable object. And inside, we can include a list of parameters to use with this function, but they are optional. And finally, we'll need a block of code inside a pair of curly braces, where we'll define any sequence of instructions that we want to declare within this function. And even if you leave it empty, so even though a function does nothing, you can declare it anyways. And that's it. We don't need anything else to declare a function. So if we declare an empty function, it does not give us any error. And even if it does nothing, you can declare it anyways. And we can invoke it. And using console there, also check that this identifier is the value of the name property of the function object. It is also good to know that any function declaration, the same as any variable declaration, will be using the space in memory that has been reserved for them before the execution starts. And using this name property, we will be able to access this function before the engine reaches that line of code. So from anywhere inside the same scope. In other words, function declarations, the same as variable declarations, are hoisted. So if we create a simple function to add two numbers, we can call it from the top of the file in this case. So with function declaration, what we're doing is just saying, hey, from now on, there's a tool you can use to add two numbers, but it's not mandatory to use it. You don't have to. I just let you know that this tool is there in case you need it. So it will remain there somewhere in memory, waiting to be used. Something like if you work in a team and you tell someone, hey, I've done some improvements on the new prototype, if you want to have a look. I just uploaded them a few minutes ago. Well, I'll see you tomorrow, or something like that. Now, let's jump to the AST Explorer to see how the parser understands this function declaration. Here, we can see how the whole function is highlighted and defined as a function declaration. Then we have the identifier, so the name of the function, and also the identifiers A and B for the parameters, and the block of code inside the curly braces, which includes, in this case, a return statement with the binary expression that we have created, with the operator plus with two identifiers. Here we can see the word statement refer to the block of instructions and to the return keyword inside of this block. And that's because upon the JavaScript language standards, so in the ECMAScript specification, there are several statements defined like this too, like variable statement, the if statement, the break statement, or even an empty statement, which is just a semicolon. We can understand a statement as it is just a standalone unit of execution or an instruction inside our program, which does not evaluate to any value. You will hear the words function statement and function declaration used indistinctly. Just keep in mind the concept we've seen with the function declaration, as it is practically the same. Even though in ECMAScript, Standalone functions are defined as function declarations, as we've already seen. Now let's see what function expressions are. Again, forget about functions for a minute and let's define what is an expression. An expression is just a unit of code that can be evaluated to a value, so that resolves to a value. For instance, 10 plus 20 resolves to 30, which is a value. 3 times x, or 3 times a plus b, resolves to some other value, depending on the value of a and b. But an expression does not need to be stored inside a variable though. Now, if we think about functions, they can also resolve to a value. In ECMAScript, we have the function expression and the arrow function expression entities, which by the way have different characteristics both in their syntax and their behavior, but they are both function expressions. As we've seen, in order to be able to call any function and use its functionality, we need some reference, so some name to which it responds. So it cannot exist a standalone function floating around inside our code without a name or a reference. So if the function has not its own name, then we say it is anonymous. On the other hand, a function can exist inside of a variable, or as a property of an object, which by the way, both have their own names or identifiers. Then, if we put both things together, the function expression will use the name of the variable or the name of the property of the object where it lives. Which is like, if you know there's someone who gives piano lessons near where you live, but even if you don't know the name of the person, you can still use the address of the house to find his telephone number and ask for some lessons. I'll show you what I mean. If we jump back to the AST Explorer, first let's declare a variable. And for that, we'll need a keyword and its identifier. And as the value of that variable, we can assign a function expression inside. I'll write it this way so it's easier to understand. Here you can see how the expression is just what's inside the assignment operator, and how the semicolon is not highlighted because it belongs to the variable declaration, so it is not part of the expression. As we said, this function inside can also be empty. And can be declared as a regular function using both the function keyword or with the arrow function syntax. In this case, we have created two expressions where the function itself has no name or identifier, so they're both anonymous. But in the case of the traditional function expression, it may have its own name. So we can also add an identifier to the function expression that lives inside a variable. Then it will be easier to deal with error messages, and the information will be much more specific, and it will be easier to know what the function does. I hope this was helpful, and I'll see you in the next lecture. Thanks for watching.